Once again, the Supreme Court fails to protect us from Donald Trump. We have two late rulings this morning. Chief Justice John Roberts, acting on his own, just issued a temporary stay of a circuit court's order for the Trump administration to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States from an El Salvadoran prison where he was accidentally sent after ICE incorrectly identified him as a gang member who, ICE incorrectly said, had his legal protected status revoked. Not true. His legal protected status had not been revoked. Nobody in the courts is denying ICE accidentally sent him down there, that it was an accident. In 2019, Garcia was given protected legal status by an immigration judge who ruled it wouldn't be safe for Garcia to be sent back to El Salvador due to threats against his life made by criminal gangs. ICE admitted they made a mistake, but the Trump administration insisting there's nothing they can do now that Garcia is no longer in their custody. A circuit court panel of judges ruled late Monday that ICE had to bring Garcia home by midnight Monday night. But then John Roberts, Chief Justice, issuing an emergency stay late Monday night, ruling Garcia must stay in the El Salvadoran prison until his case can be resolved. How bad is this ruling? Would you want to be in that torture chamber down in El Salvador? It's bad. Chief Justice Roberts should have refused to hear this case and said the lower court's ruling stands. Here's the second ruling. It's bad. It's not the end of the world, but it's bad. Garcia, to refresh your memory, was deported after Trump invoked the Enemy Aliens Act. Trump, without congressional authority, declared that the United States, and I'm not making this up, is at war with Venezuela because its president has been sending gangs into our country to murder and rape. Therefore, as president, Trump, invoking the Alien Enemies Act, insisting he has the wartime power to suspend habeas corpus and order ICE to round up anyone he deems to be a terrorist and then forcibly deport them to that prison in El Salvador. Several challenges wound their way through the courts, with Washington, D.C. District Court Judge James Boasberg issuing several temporary restraining orders blocking Trump's invocation of the Alien Enemies Act. Judge Boasberg blocked it before Trump even signed the executive order. And right after Trump issued that executive order, Judge Boasberg discovered that there were 3 flights filled with migrants on their way to El Salvador, and Judge Boasberg ordered them to turn around. ICE defied his order. The Trump administration ignored his order. Judge Boasberg issued more restraining orders blocking Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act. The court, late Monday, in a 5-4 ruling, said that Trump can resume the flights deporting Venezuelan gang members to El Salvador under the Enemy Aliens Act until it can be decided by the Supreme Court whether Trump can, in fact, use those emergency powers to deport these migrants. So, from what I can tell, the Supreme Court ruled essentially on the calendar for these challenges. They said, in effect, Trump right now can invoke wartime powers and resume the deportations. The court ruled late Monday night, in later hearings, we will determine whether Trump can, in fact, invoke the Alien Enemies Act. He can do it now, temporarily, but we will rule later as to whether or not it's constitutional. The ruling, and I have to reread it, but the ruling seems to me, and I could be wrong, it seems to be an issue of process. How do we proceed? And the court is saying the president has the right for the time being to invoke wartime powers. The court is saying, but let's hold off on deciding if these wartime powers, if the Alien Enemies Act is applicable. So, in a 5-4 unsigned decision, the Supreme Court late Monday night ruled that Trump does have, for the time being, authority to invoke the Alien Enemies Act and resume the deportation of the Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. But this is very important. The court also ruled that the migrants who are being deported are entitled to due process. They're entitled to a hearing before a judge. So Trump is claiming that this is a victory, but so is the ACLU, which brought this case, because the court ruled that all these migrants being deported are entitled to what is called a habeas corpus ruling in the district they are being held, something all the men that have already been sent down to the El Salvadoran prison were denied. So it's good and it's bad. The court is failing us because as usual, there's slow walking justice. The Supreme Court agreeing with the Trump administration that the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court, Judge Boasberg, was not the proper venue for this case. Instead, this case should have been taken before the Fifth Circuit Court, which covers Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. You might want to go back and watch my last show where I explain why the Fifth Circuit Court is our country's most conservative court. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee, once again joining the three other liberal justices in their dissent. There's a lot to go over, and I know it's confusing. The Justice Department, the Supreme Court, of the three branches of government, it's the hardest to understand. It is a disappointing ruling, but there's hope. Stay with me, and I will try to explain what's going on. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like this episode so I remain in your feed. And the best way to help this show is to copy and paste and share it with friends. They are throttling back shows like this, so I need your help. It's it could be discouraging, but I'm sick in the head and it only makes me angrier. So, okay. Peter Wenner has a terrific piece in The Atlantic called Trump is Gaslighting Us. We all know what gaslighting is. In the article, he says Trump's manufactured chaos, his tenuous relation to fact and fiction, is a calculated authoritarian ruse to make it impossible for Americans and, of course, the news media to track what's actually happening. So, if you say, my head is gyrating, I'm all tapped out, it's coming at me so rapidly, well, that's the point. When you feel confused, squeezed out, that means Trump is winning. Ever since Trump was sworn back in, before Trump was sworn back in, I have warned, do not listen to what Trump says. Pay attention to what he does. Pay attention to these court rulings. It's difficult to follow these court rulings. Pay attention to actual legislation coming out of Congress, like the budget and the continuing resolutions. Most, if not all, of what's coming out of the White House is noise. It doesn't matter what anyone there says because they are all congenital liars. Pay attention to what they are doing, and very importantly, what are their lawyers saying when they go before these judges? What are Trump's lawyers putting into writing when they file motions? What is being preserved for history? That's what you pay attention to. Trump is just going to lie. The chaos right now on Wall Street is Donald Trump's brain writ large. Wild swings with investors and our White House having zero understanding or plan for the future. Everyone, and now the entire world, is off balance. Trillions of dollars evaporating. At one point on Monday, the stock market entered bear territory, meaning stocks were worth 20% less than they were from their peak on February 19th, 2025. This is the worst performance for any president in American history. No president has tanked the stock market this fast, this deep. But the stock market isn't the economy. It only reflects and occasionally affects the economy. Nevertheless, what's happening is not healthy, and it's not going to end well. It's not normal for one malignant narcissist to control the world markets. And while most of the world is in a state of shock, never underestimate the buying opportunities for Trump's wealthy donors contained within all this madness. There is panic selling by people who can't afford uncertainty, and that allows the richest 1% perched atop piles of cash to leap in and concentrate more of their wealth buying up our country's assets at fire sale prices. This is a manufactured crisis, a manufactured emergency that creates a climate of terror, allowing for greater income inequality. We're seeing panic selling and then panic buying. We saw it on Monday after a rumor began circulating that Trump was putting a 90-day freeze on his tariffs. When that rumor spread, the market soared, and then the market tanked after it turned out to be just a rumor. The plan coming out of the White House is a rumor. There is no plan. That is the plan, not to have a plan. It's chaos. Because it's creating in Trump's fevered mind once-in-a-lifetime buying opportunities for his donors who cannot believe how cheap Apple just got. It is strategic madness. Trump promises these tariffs are non-negotiable, while at the very same time saying he's flooded with phone calls from world leaders wanting to negotiate. The Japanese prime minister flying into D.C., Trump says, to make a deal on these non-negotiable tariffs. Trump saying he's beginning to negotiate the non-negotiable. So Trump is stupid, but he knows how to drive a nation and now the entire world economy insane. You don't have to be a genius. You just have to be dangerous. At the same exact time, convicted felon Peter Navarro, Trump's trade advisor, is counseling patients, promising Trump's draconian tariffs will rebuild America's manufacturing base while we just need to give the tariffs time. Trump literally telling the American people yesterday, be strong. He said, don't be weak. He said Sunday, take your medicine. He literally said, take your medicine, America. Language reserved only for fascists. This is how authoritarian leaders talk to their people. Elon Musk, who, like Peter Navarro, should be a convicted felon. Navarro is a convicted felon. Elon Musk should be a convicted felon. Elon Musk saying at the same exact time that all of this is going on that he wants zero tariffs. He says in a perfect world, the entire economy would be a free trade zone. Peter Navarro now getting into a pissing match, accusing Elon Musk of not being a real car manufacturer, rather someone who snaps together foreign-made auto parts on U.S. soil. Musk calling Navarro a Harvard-educated fool, adding nothing good ever came out of Harvard. Musk saying, quote, a PhD in economics from Harvard is a bad thing, not a good thing. Musk said that after someone attacked Peter Navarro on Twitter by quoting conservative economist Thomas Sowell, who once said, quote, in every disaster throughout American history, there always seems to be a man from Harvard in the middle of it, unquote. Sowell is, by the way, a man from Harvard. Chaos in the market, chaos in the White House, it's exactly what authoritarians thrive on. Nobody understands what's going on. That's the way Trump wants it. Because if everybody's confused, only a strong man can make sense of the maelstrom he has wrought. As Trump repeatedly says, I and only I can fix it. What Trump conveniently leaves out is he broke it. In Peter Winter's piece for The Atlantic, he quotes Russian chess champion turned pro-democracy activist Garry Kasparov, who said almost a decade ago that the point of all the lies promulgated by crypto-fascists, quasi-authoritarians like Putin, attempting to gain total power over a nation's people and its institutions. Garry Kasparov said the point of the lies, quote, isn't only to misinform or push an agenda. It is to exhaust your critical thinking, to annihilate the truth. To annihilate the truth. Donald Trump is taking a wrecking ball to reality. We build reality brick by brick, and we can study reality brick by brick. But when you take a wrecking ball, it's not a controlled demolition. It's an uncontrolled demolition. What he's doing to the federal government right now is an uncontrolled demolition, and we're looking at all these bricks flying. We didn't even know what these bricks were before Trump destroyed everything. This is all part of Project 2025. You don't understand Social Security. Why would you? It works. And then when you take a wrecking ball to it and it all starts crumbling very quickly, you have no idea what to pay attention to. Donald Trump is a pathological liar. Everyone around him is or becomes a pathological liar. He normalizes lying. His daughter Tiffany didn't marry the son of a billionaire or even a millionaire. Doesn't matter. Trump just says she did. Tell the banks I'm not broke, so they'll lend me money to pay my bills. Lie for me. It was a year ago that a New York court ordered Trump to pay $500 million in fines for defrauding his lenders. After the ruling, Trump said, but I'm rich. I didn't lie to them. I'm rich. Then, when it came time to put up $500 million bond, after the judgment, Trump's attorney said he doesn't have the money. His entire existence is a lie. And now he's insisting he's a billionaire again because of Trump Media, which owns his social media platform, Truth Social, whose market cap is $5 billion. Forbes took him off the list. Now he's back on the list. Everybody's sucking up. Everybody's taking a knee. Everybody's bowing to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a billionaire. On paper, Trump looks like a billionaire because Truth Social, Trump Media, has a market cap of $5 billion. He owns about half the stock in Trump Media, so that makes him worth, on paper, $2.5 billion until he tries to unload that stock, and then he gets to see what it's actually worth. So the entire company, according to the stock market, is worth $5 billion. Yet it had a revenue last year of $3.6 million. That means a grand total of $3.6 million total came into the cash register. Somehow it was able to pay Devin Nunes, the former congressman, $1 million a year as the chief executive officer, as though Devin Nunes has any idea on how to run a social media company. Truth Social, Trump Media, brought in $3.6 million for all of 2024 and recorded a net loss of more than $400 million. It lost $400 million. Where, oh, where did that money go? The original accounting firm last year that took Trump Media public last year just got banned by the SEC from ever doing business with publicly traded companies again. Lies. Nobody uses Truth Social. Nobody is buying any of the products it has to offer. Nobody is advertising on Truth Social. It brought in $3.6 million last year and spent $400 million. It lost more than $400 million, and yet somehow its market cap, what it trades for on the stock market, $5 billion. And that is Trump's supposed fortune, according to Forbes magazine, along with some cryptocurrency ventures. It's not real. It's all a lie. Trump and everyone around him, they are all liars, and you cannot get close. You cannot get into the inner circle unless you're a pathological liar. In the run-up to the Houthi airstrikes, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally included Atlantic Magazine's Jeffrey Goldberg in a Signal group chat. Waltz insisted, I don't know Goldberg. Then it turns out there are photos of them together. Like this one. Turns out he's a liar. He knows Goldberg. And the reason Goldberg was in Waltz's phone is because they shared numbers. But lying in the Trump administration is an autonomic response, like your eyes dilating after someone turns off the light. They don't even think about lying. It just happens. In the Trump administration, the bigger the liar, the higher you climb. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is operating at Olympiad levels of mendacity, testifying under oath he doesn't have a drinking problem and that sex with that woman was consensual. He flat out lied and said, I didn't share any war plans in that Signal group chat. We saw the texts. He was literally announcing the time and place of an airstrike, several airstrikes on Houthi fighters, hours before the jet fighters took off, jeopardizing our pilots. He's a liar and an abuser of women. Just ask his own mother, who put that into writing. According to the New York Times, Pete Hegseth's own mother wrote him an email saying she was sick of how he abused, that was the word she used, abused women. And then, after her son got nominated for defense secretary, Mommy said, yes, I did write it, but I didn't mean it. Because, like her son, a liar. Tulsi Gabbard, our new director of national intelligence, testifying under oath that no classified material was shared on that Signal group chat. Now, she oversees 18 of our nation's intelligence agencies. And under oath, she said no classified material was shared by Pete Hegseth during those Signal group chats. What is more classified than the time and place of military airstrikes hours before they take place? She is a liar. Pam Bondi, our new Attorney General, said there is no reason to launch an investigation into the Signal group chat, adding what Hillary Clinton did with her email servers was far worse. Is that how they taught our Attorney General to argue in law school? Pete Hegseth did nothing wrong because 10 years ago, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton used a private email server. That is what passes for legal reasoning in the Trump Justice Department. And by the way, she was the one Trump picked after Matt Gaetz was unavailable. She's who you get if Matt Gaetz can't do the job. The Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton's private emails, did not involve the safety of our soldiers. Carelessness with classified war plans. It violates the Espionage Act, among dozens of other laws regulating the handling of our military secrets. But how could Pam Bondi, Trump's Attorney General, ever prosecute Pete Hegseth for the very same crime Donald Trump was indicted over? Of course, they will say, but Biden took classified material home. Yes, by accident. The same way Vice President Mike Pence took classified material home, by accident. And when the National Archives said to Pence and Biden, return the boxes, they did. Trump refused to turn his classified documents over. The National Archives kept requesting them. He wouldn't turn them over. That's the difference. That's why he was indicted, not just for violating the Espionage Act. He was indicted for lying, for ordering Walt Nauta, his valet, for ordering the head of Mar-a-Lago's IT department to hide the boxes of classified material from the FBI and then destroy the tapes, the surveillance tapes, Mar-a-Lago surveillance tapes showing Walt Nauta hiding boxes of classified material from the FBI. The only reason Trump never went on trial for this is he's back in the Oval Office. And it's official policy not to prosecute sitting presidents. And after the Supreme Court ruled last summer, it's next to impossible to prosecute former presidents, absolutely impossible to prosecute sitting presidents. These people are dishonest and rotten to the core of their very being. They are stupid. They don't read. They're incompetent. They only want to be told what's pleasing to their ears. They are dishonest. They are congenital and or pathological liars. By now, if you listen to this show, you're all familiar with the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I talked about him at the top. He came to this country in 2011 at the age of 16 to escape gangs. In 2019, an immigration judge here in the United States gave Garcia protected legal status, instructing ICE that under no circumstances can Garcia get sent back to El Salvador. We have learned this week that gangs were blackmailing Garcia's mother back in El Salvador, insisting she turn him over to work for them, otherwise they will track him down and kill him. The immigration judge in 2019 said Garcia cannot go back. That was in 2019. In mid-March, Garcia was arrested in an IKEA parking lot during a routine traffic stop. Not charged with a crime, no criminal record. Garcia had been checking in with immigration once a year, as he was so ordered to do. He never broke any law. But the arresting officer ran a check and wrongly discovered that Garcia's temporary legal status had been revoked. It had not been revoked. ICE later said it was an administrative error, a mistake. So the police waited for Garcia's wife to arrive and pick up their child, who Garcia was traveling with, and then Garcia was taken into custody. He's married to a U.S. citizen. He has 3 children, all U.S. citizens. One of them has special needs. Within 3 days, Garcia whisked off to that prison in El Salvador. ICE and lawyers for the Justice Department admitting, yes, it was an administrative error, that his protective legal status had not been lifted. ICE admitting he should not have been arrested. ICE admitting he should not have been flown to El Salvador. ICE admitting he did nothing wrong. That's not to be disputed. Not a gang member, not a criminal. Indisputable when they take it before the courts. But Sunday night, Trump, despite all the evidence and testimony as to Garcia's innocence from Trump's own immigration department, Donald Trump once again tells reporters Garcia was MS-13 and belongs in that prison down in El Salvador. So, you see why during the presidential election, lying about those Haitians eating cats and dogs was precisely why nobody should have voted for Donald Trump? Those Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, were in our country with protected legal status. And they were invited to work in Springfield, Ohio. But because they are black, they're Haitian, Trump spread the lie that they were criminals eating cats and dogs. Springfield, Ohio became a war zone. It was safe until Trump accused the Haitian immigrants of eating cats and dogs, stealing cats and dogs. Police, state troopers had to be sent into Springfield, Ohio as MAGA crazies, as neo-Nazis began phoning in bomb scares, threatening not just the Haitians, but the city council, threatening to blow up the schools where the children of the Haitian immigrants attended. J.D. Vance repeating the lie that Garcia is MS-13. The same J.D. Vance who kept repeating the lie about those Haitian immigrants until it was completely disproven, and he had no choice but to admit, yes, I was lying, adding, I would lie again because I lied to prove a larger point. And that point is J.D. Vance is a racist. J.D. Vance literally said, it's okay to lie if it's in the service of a greater good. And that greater good, I guess, would be driving black people, Haitians, out of Ohio. On Twitter earlier this month, immediately after it was discovered that Garcia was not MS-13, was not a gangbanger, was innocent, Vance took to Twitter to lord his Yale Law School degree over a journalist reporting the story about Garcia being wrongly detained. Vance condescendingly suggested on Twitter that this reporter familiarize himself with the court documents before insisting Garcia isn't a member of MS-13. J.D. Vance assuring the reporter, I'm the vice president. I went to Yale Law School. I reviewed the documents. Garcia is a gang member. Not in the court documents. J.D. Vance is a liar. He was lying. Apparently, attending Yale Law School confers upon you not so much a degree as it does a license not to know what you're talking about, but sound like you do. A lot of people believe J.D. Vance. He's a liar. And so is Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, who on Fox News Sunday, repeating the libel that Garcia has ties to MS-13. How could she do this? She's our Attorney General. Her very own Justice Department, hours earlier, was arguing before a judge that Garcia is not a member of MS-13. It's settled law, that it was an administrative error. It was a mistake. He's not a gang member. Her own Justice Department saying he doesn't belong in that El Salvadoran prison. But she repeats the lie that he does, that he's MS-13. The argument that her Justice Department is making, they're saying that Garcia is innocent. It was an administrative error. It was a mistake. But now that he's in the custody of El Salvador, there's nothing the United States can do. That's the official argument. When you get these attorneys in a courtroom, when they have to put things into writing, they don't lie. And this is where it's getting really interesting. It's getting really interesting. It's what Rudy Giuliani did during the run-up to January 6th, where he lost 60 court challenges claiming voter fraud. He would go before a judge and say, we have no evidence of voter fraud. It's just a theory, Your Honor. And the judge would say, what the hell are you doing here? And then once he got out of the courtroom, Giuliani would stand in front of a bank of microphones and saying, we presented to the judge incontrovertible evidence of massive voter fraud. There's what these liars say to the American people, and what they say when they're covering their own asses standing before a judge, or when they have to put something into writing, a motion. It's a completely different story. People don't read the motions filed by the Justice Department where they're telling the truth. So the argument they're making, it is one of the dumbest, the most dishonest arguments. They should all be disbarred. The argument Pam Bondi is making is that since Garcia is no longer in American custody, we can't take him back. Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, on Friday sent a lawyer before a judge to say Garcia is not a criminal, not a gang member, should never have been arrested, but now that he's been handed over to El Salvadoran authorities, there's no way to get him out of that prison. That's the Justice Department's official argument, and now it's before the Supreme Court. Now it's going to be before the Supreme Court. Garcia, they're saying, innocent, it's a mistake, can't get him back. And she knows Garcia is innocent. But Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, had no problem taking to Fox News, insisting Garcia is a criminal gang member, adding, this is what The Guardian wrote. I didn't see the interview. This is The Guardian reporting that she said, quote, "The best thing to do is to get these people out of our country." Innocent people? Is that who you're talking about? To get these people out of these people. Well, that's not what the judge who gave Garcia protected legal status said in 2019 about these people. These people. She's dripping with sarcasm because to her, to this administration, to MAGA Republicans, every single man loaded up on those 3 flights to El Salvador, they're not people. She has zero evidence that they are criminals or gang members or terrorists. Zero. They were sent to that prison by virtue solely of their tattoos. So CBS News, 60 Minutes, poured over the arrest documents ICE is attempting to keep secret. CBS News examined a list of 179 Venezuelan men who were deported to that El Salvadoran prison. Trump, in signing the executive order and authorizing their deportation, says they're all terrorists, criminals, and gang members. But according to CBS News, 75% of those men have zero criminal records. No criminal records in America, no criminal records in Venezuela. According to CBS News, 22% of them did, in fact, have criminal records for misdemeanors like shoplifting or trespassing. Now, if you listen to this show, in the past, I have insisted that none of these men are gang members or criminals. And I said that because ICE has refused to turn over any information. They claim because we're in a state of war with Venezuela, the criminal records of the Venezuelan men being deported to El Salvador, those records are state secrets, and it would jeopardize national security for ICE to make public any information about these, prisoners of war? So, according to CBS News, 22% of the Venezuelan men sent down to El Salvador have some criminal records. for minor nonviolent offenses. CBS says of all the Venezuelan men, 12 have been accused, not conviction, no conviction, accused of a serious violent crime. Well, so has Trump. Actually, the difference is a jury in a civil trial ruled that Trump did, in fact, sexually assault E. Jean Carroll. A civil trial, not a criminal one, so no jail sentence for Trump. But he is a convicted felon. Trump has a longer rap sheet than all these guys put together. Okay? But most importantly, there is not a shred of any evidence that these men are terrorists, gang members, enemy combatants. The entire premise of shipping these men to El Salvador is they are terrorists. The name of the prison in El Salvador is CECOT, which stands for the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism. Let me repeat that. The name is the Center for the Confinement of Terrorism. You have to cough. That's the El Salvadoran dialect. Coughing. No, let me have some water here. Got it? The prison is for terrorists because Trump signed an executive order giving him wartime powers to send Venezuelans to El Salvador. By the way, Garcia is El Salvadoran, so not even shouldn't be part of the roundup. Okay. Trump signed the executive order invoking the Alien Enemies Act, calling these men terrorists. No evidence. They are not terrorists. Why? How do I know that? Because we are not at war with Venezuela. Trump's war authorization, invocation of the Enemy Aliens Act notwithstanding. Is it Enemy Aliens Act or Alien Enemies Act? I'm sorry. It's either the Alien Enemies Act or the Enemy Alien. I'm going to go with Enemy Alien. Now I'm okay. What is it? I don't know. It's either the Alien Enemies Act or I've been reading a lot. My brain is fried. Donald Trump authorized the shipment of these men to El Salvador under the auspices of, let's call it the Alien Enemies Act, claiming we have been invaded by Venezuela. Now, as of the late night ruling from the Supreme Court, that is still to be decided by the Supreme Court, whether in fact we are in a state of war with Venezuela. I know the court motions and arguments are boring, but these are incredible. Lawyers for Pam Bondi are telling the judges, and this is what's going to go before the Supreme Court now, Trump and the Department of Justice arguing that Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, is working with Tren de Aragua, that's the Venezuelan gang involved in drugs and human smuggling. According to court documents, according to Pam Bondi's Justice Department, in justifying the deportation of Garcia, who's not even from Venezuela, in justifying the deportation of these Venezuelan men, we are at war with Venezuela because they have invaded our country with gang members from Tren de Aragua who have been sent into this country specifically by the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro to engage in murder, racketeering, forced prostitution, money laundering, illegal mining, bribery, and retail theft. Sounds like the Republican convention last summer in Milwaukee. They are claiming this with a straight face. Now, I have no doubt that there are Venezuelan gang members in America. MS-13, by the way, started in Los Angeles and was exported to El Salvador. I have no doubt that there are gang members. There is no way Nicolas Maduro is stupid enough to send gangs, marauding gangs, into the United States to murder, force women and men into prostitution, bribery, theft, illegal mining. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? Read the court documents. Pay attention to when Pam Bondi and DJ Sauer, the Solicitor General, have to go before the Supreme Court and make this argument. By the way, the Solicitor General is the same guy. He was Trump's lawyer. He's the same guy who argued last year in the immunity hearings before the Supreme Court that Donald Trump, as president, could order SEAL Team 6 to kill his political opponent, and he could not be tried in a court of law for that after he left office. He would first have to be impeached by the House of Representatives after he left office, and then a trial would have to be held in the Senate. He would have to be convicted by the Senate, and then maybe, according to our new Solicitor General, who's going to argue this before the Supreme Court, then maybe Donald Trump, as an ex-president, could be put on trial for ordering the murder of his political opponent. Trump signed this executive order stating we're at war with Venezuela. It is kind of funny. It is. I mean, you know, if you're disassociating from reality and you don't care about Garcia and these men or the Constitution, it's kind of funny that Trump is back in the Oval Office signing an executive order declaring that we're at war with Venezuela. Not Russia, Venezuela. It's a lie. He says we're in a state of war with Venezuela, and because of that, ICE is authorized to round up enemy combatants, terrorists, and ship them to El Salvador's prison, a prison specifically for terrorists. Now, you need a congressional authorization to declare war. Short of that, you need some kind of war authorization from Congress. After 60 or 90 days, the president has to get authorization from Congress to say we're at war. Trump has neither, and he can't get one because he's lying. If Venezuela were really sending gangs into America to kill us all, if we really were being invaded by Venezuela, Caracas right now would be glass. There'd be boots on the ground in Venezuela and trained death squads killing union organizers by now. Our CIA would already be training death squads to kill union organizers. Trump is lying. Again, I'm not saying these gangs are are decent. You know, they're just not enemy combatants. We're not at war with Venezuela. Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, our President, our current government, is telling the courts, telling the American people that Venezuela has launched an attack on the United States by sending Tren de Aragua into our cities to kill, murder, and rape. It's in writing. They've put it in writing. And then he signed an executive order invoking a war power not used since Roosevelt rounded up Japanese citizens during World War II. So, why aren't we calling for an all-out war with Venezuela? I mean, this is the United States. We love war. Why aren't we invading Venezuela? What? I mean, he's scapegoating Venezuela. There are a lot of problems in this country. Let's go to war. He can't do it because Speaker Mike Johnson would never, ever debate a war resolution against Venezuela because, there's C-SPAN. And the last thing these Republicans want is a public debate over an executive order claiming America is at war with Venezuela. Because it's a lie. It's a lie. Now, Trump, I have faith that he's not going to get away with this. But you have to call the State Department. You have to call your senators, the White House, members of Congress, write letters. The protests on Saturday, you have to inform your representatives, we are not at war with Venezuela. So the Supreme Court has yet to rule on this. But the Supreme Court doesn't get to decide. The Supreme Court doesn't declare war. Congress does. Not the president, not the Supreme Court. Congress does. Now, this Supreme Court, if this Supreme Court allows Donald Trump to invoke the Enemy Aliens Act to say we are at war with Venezuela, we're looking at the Dred Scott decision. We're looking at Karamutsu decision. Congress, not the president, not the Supreme Court, decides if we are in a state of war with Venezuela. This is Saddam Hussein. Stick with me on this, please. This is Saddam Hussein, bad guy. But he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Please, I know I ask a lot of my listeners. Please pay attention to this. Saddam Hussein, bad guy, but he didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and he didn't play any role in the planning and execution of 9/11. When we invaded Iraq in 2003, Bush and Cheney convinced more than half this country that Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11 and he had weapons of mass destruction. Now, Bush and Cheney knew they were lying to the American people, and more than half the country believed them. Please pay attention. Please. This is the Taliban. Very bad guys. Really bad. Bad. But they, like Saddam Hussein, had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. Google it. On October 7th, 2001, just weeks after 9/11, America invaded Afghanistan. We invaded Afghanistan where the Taliban were in charge and where Osama bin Laden was hiding in the mountainous region of Kandahar, a part of Afghanistan that borders Pakistan. I've talked about this before. This is really important. The Taliban had nothing to do with 9/11. I want you to Google that. Type in the words, did the Taliban have anything to do with 9/11? I mention this because the United States spent 20 years fighting in Afghanistan because the American people were convinced the Taliban assisted Osama bin Laden on 9/11. Osama bin Laden, head of Al-Qaeda, eventually got taken out by President Obama. Osama bin Laden was in, where was he? Where was he finally killed? Where was he living peacefully? Pakistan. Bin Laden had been living in Pakistan before, during, and after 9/11. And bin Laden, as well as Al-Qaeda, received assistance from cells within the Pakistani military. I'm not going to talk about the Saudi princes from Saudi Arabia, where bin Laden was from Yemen. His family's from Yemen. Saudi Arabia financed 9/11. Bin Laden is from a rich family from Saudi Arabia. He was living in Pakistan, hiding out in what was called the failed state of Afghanistan. He was up in the hills where he could be left alone. Bin Laden, that's why he was in Afghanistan occasionally, because there was no federal government. Bin Laden was killed by the CIA, by our military, in Abbottabad, Pakistan. For about a decade after 9/11, bin Laden was not only hiding in Pakistan, but among certain quarters in Pakistan, he was considered a hero for 9/11. I want you to look up the name Dr. Shaki Afridi, for Shakil Afridi, Dr. Shakil Afridi, Shakil, last name Afridi, Afridi. And then, if I'm wrong, leave a comment. You want to correct me? Leave a comment. Dr. Shakil Afridi is a Pakistani doctor who assisted the CIA in finding Osama bin Laden. He's a hero. Dr. Afridi set up a vaccination program in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where he handed out free shots for hepatitis B and polio. And it was through these shots that Dr. Afridi was able to retrieve a sample of Osama bin Laden's DNA. Bin Laden was living in Abbottabad, Pakistan after 9/11, wandering around. Oh, free Hep B shots, free polio shots? Yeah. Well, hey, doc, I'll take one. And the doctor, Afridi, working with the CIA, gave him his vaccine and retrieved a sample of the DNA, and the CIA was able to prove from that shot that it was, in fact, Osama bin Laden living in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Pretty cool, right? Something out of a Clancy novel, or, it's great. Once the CIA confirmed the DNA, they launched the invasion, and they killed Osama bin Laden. They killed him because there was no way bin Laden was ever going to get a trial. He had to be killed. Dr. Afridi was responsible for the CIA finding Osama bin Laden. American hero. Justice was served. So, where is Dr. Shakil Afridi? Have you Googled it yet? Where is he now? He is serving a 33-year prison sentence in Pakistan for treason, for taking part in the killing of Osama bin Laden. He is now sitting in a Pakistani prison, convicted of treason. Why? Because he helped the CIA kill Osama bin Laden, where in Pakistan, Osama bin Laden, among some quarters, is considered a hero. And yet, America invaded Afghanistan. Not our ally, Pakistan, or our other ally, Saudi Arabia. Those two countries there, we know how many people on the planes were from Saudi Arabia. We know where the money came from. Starting in 2001, we waged war in Afghanistan against the Taliban for 20 years. The Taliban, who had nothing to do with 9/11. Biden, after 20 years, finally got us out in 2021. And most Americans, if they bothered to care, would still tell you, why were we in Afghanistan for 20 years? Because the Taliban attacked us on 9/11. You know why most Americans still believe Afghanistan attacked us on 9/11? Partly thanks to this guy, Barack Obama, who got elected in 2008, telling American voters the very same lie about Afghanistan. Barack Obama, when he was running for president, said the war in Iraq was a mistake. He got that right. He said Saddam Hussein didn't attack us on 9/11 and he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Barack Obama was telling the truth there. He said, however, this is where he told a lie. He said the Bush administration took its eye off the ball. Barack Obama, running for president, said that America doesn't belong in Iraq. We belong in Afghanistan because that's who attacked us on 9/11. And that is how you end up fighting 20 years in Afghanistan, attacking the wrong country. All anyone said is, after Biden pulled out, he botched the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Are you kidding me? I remember doing this show and people were complaining he botched the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Nobody ever asked, what were we doing there in the first place? Most Americans, I think, by now, know that invading Iraq was a war crime. I think most Americans can agree that Bush and Cheney, I'm going to say a majority of Americans, are war criminals. I think they should be frog-marched before The Hague. Most Americans probably wouldn't be for that. You know, maybe we could compromise. Jenna Bush could get fired from the Today Show. Maybe Jenna Bush should have to spend the rest of her life helping kids her age who came home from Iraq and Afghanistan without faces. That's what I would tell. If I ever met Jenna Bush and went on the Today Show, you should probably not be having a good time on the Today Show. you should probably dedicate the rest of your life to all the men and women who came back from your father's illegal wars without faces. That's what you should be doing. And I would tell her that, which is why I'm never, ever going to be on the Today Show. So most of us know Iraq was a lie. Afghanistan, I think a lot of us. I talk to a lot of people. I have politicians on this show. The toughest question I ask people running for office is, did the Taliban attack us on 9/11? That's my litmus test for candidates. The ones who say, no, they didn't, they get my endorsement. The ones who say, well, it's complicated, go F yourself. We believe, most of Americans believe the lie that the Taliban were behind 9/11. They were not. Have you Googled it yet? Now listen to me. The Taliban, bad guys. The world would be better off without the Taliban. But they had nothing to do with Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden was hiding in the hills of Kandahar because Afghanistan was a failed state, deeply divided along ethnic and tribal lines. In Afghanistan, you have the Pashtuns, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras, the Taliban, to name just a few. I would tell you the others, but I barely butchered their names. I don't want to. The Taliban were in charge of Kabul, the capital, on 9/11. They were at war with the Northern Alliance. That was a coalition of Tajiks, Uzbeks, and other tribes within Afghanistan. The last thing the Taliban needed was another enemy, especially the United States. Which is why, now please write this down and Google it, okay? They didn't want a war with the United States because they were busy fighting the Pashtuns, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Hazaras. They had all these enemies, okay? That is why immediately after 9/11, the Taliban offered to assist the Bush administration. Several times they made an offer to help them find Osama bin Laden. Now, I'm not so sure they could have found him. I think he was already in Pakistan. But several times after the United States began bombing Afghanistan, the Taliban offered to turn bin Laden over, but they had several conditions. Stop bombing us. We'll give you bin Laden, or we'll try to find him, but you got to stop bombing Afghanistan. And they wanted evidence that Osama bin Laden was actually behind 9/11. In other words, they wanted a trial. Bush, at least 3 times, rejected the offer to receive help from the Taliban in finding bin Laden. Instead, it was, you do what you're told, turn him over. We don't negotiate. 20 years later, the Taliban is in charge of Afghanistan. We don't negotiate because, do you really think George W. Bush wanted bin Laden turned over? No war. No war in Iraq. No war in Afghanistan. As Senator John Kerry, the Democratic nominee in 2004, said, There should never have been a war. This was a police action. You find bin Laden and you bring him to justice. George Bush didn't want to put bin Laden in chains and have him stand trial. A trial, do you think, for 1 second? And you all know this. In America on 9/11, nobody was allowed to get on board a flight anywhere. Nobody. Except, and you know this, the bin Laden family. Only the bin Laden family, friends to the Bush family, were allowed to jet back to Saudi Arabia. Got to get them out of the country. Really, we can't hold them for questioning? Maybe find out have you spoken to Osama? Do you know it? Only people allowed to leave, to get on a flight after 9/11, Osama bin Laden's relatives. So George W. Bush was never going to put bin Laden on trial because, like Lee Harvey Oswald, bin Laden had to be killed. And he was. So, yes, there are some crazy conspiracy theories surrounding 9/11. The two craziest conspiracy theories are that Saddam Hussein and the Taliban had anything to do with it. That's the crazy conspiracy theory. Somebody planted the idea 9/11 was an inside job. It was self-demolition to make anybody who questions 9/11 look insane. The two craziest conspiracy theories are the ones that Saddam Hussein and the Taliban were in on it. And those conspiracy theories, look at the results. 20-year war in Afghanistan. For what? For what? And people say, well, that's unfair to our troops to say it was for nothing. As opposed to sending them to Afghanistan and Iraq for what? In the Republican mind, it's more unfair to the troops for me to say Iraq and Afghanistan should never have happened, it was a lie, than invading Iraq and Afghanistan. That's okay to use our troops this way. But to say it was all for nothing is disrespecting our troops. Go F yourself. Go F yourself. The point is, most Americans still think the Taliban is synonymous with Al-Qaeda. And this is why we are a stupid people. America. We have to be this stupid. We are the dumbest people on the planet. Crumbling schools and infrastructure, but trillions for a 20-year war to fight a global war on terror, waging it against people who never attacked us. You see, a country cannot get away with spending this much on war, sacrificing so many lives, spilling so much blood and treasure, without being incredibly stupid. It's the only way they can pull this off. We have to be this stupid. It's also why we don't have Medicare for all. Americans are stupid. You know, I was just reading Social Security's administrative costs are 1%. It's incredible. 1%. Medicare, a little more expensive, 1.4% of Medicare spending is administrative costs, 1.4%. That includes salaries, helping patients sign up for Medicare, investigating Medicare fraud. 1.4% administrative costs. Anybody want to venture a guess what United Healthcare's administrative costs are? 20%. They take 20% off the top for salaries, stock buybacks, and most importantly, hiring people to kill you, to murder you by denying your claims, to slow walk your claims so you die before they ever get approved. But Elon Musk, as we speak, stripping Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, firing workers, claiming he's rooting out fraud and abuse where there is none. The same way George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were taking on terrorists who attacked us on 9/11 where there were none. The only fraud and abuse is from companies like United Healthcare. But because we are stupid, some believe him. But I saw the protests on Saturday, and I'm reading the polling. We're stupid, but the vast majority of us despise Elon Musk, despise him. But we are stupid. The media is complicit in dumbing us down. Americans don't know the difference between Medicare's 1.4% administrative costs and United Healthcare's 20% administrative costs. When you talk to a Republican, it makes no sense to them. When you poll Americans on Medicare for All, and I get pushback from my listeners on this, but when you poll Medicare for All, a slight majority of Americans still believe private, for-profit health insurance is better than Medicare for All. Now, I know there are some polls, I think from the Kaiser Group, showing Medicare for All is more popular. But those are what are called push polls. Those are polls where Medicare for All first has to be explained. And then after it's explained, it's called a push poll. Then Medicare for All is more popular than for-profit health insurance. But push polls are not an accurate reflection of what Americans believe. Everything I'm telling you is easily verifiable. It's all the truth. But do you think Moms for Liberty would allow any of this to be taught in Florida, Arkansas, or Tennessee, or any of the other members of the old Confederacy that should be stripped of their statehood and treated no better than Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, or the Virgin Islands? We should never have allowed the old Confederacy back in as equals. By the way, there's a reason Trump wants to make Canada our 51st state. He's stupid. He just sees white people. He thinks it's like half white. But he just thinks, oh, Canadians are all white. Well, Canada can't be our 51st state. I personally think it's a great idea because you would probably, it has the population of California. So I would love another California. I don't think we're going to divide it up into 10 separate states, adding 20 more senators. I would love 20 Canadian senators. But even if Canada is just one state, even if it's our 51st state, well, do the math. Each member of our House of Representatives represents 650,000 people, about. And then they split it up. They divide the country. Was it 530? You got to get 530 members of Congress. I think that's the number. And you have to divide it among the people. So every 10 years, some states gain a congressional district, some states lose. So I think making Canada our 51st state is a terrific idea because it would bring in about 60, 58 new congressional districts. We'd have to redraw the maps. All right, we'd only get 2 senators. It's the 51st state. But you'd have to create about 60 new congressional districts. I'm sold. If annexing Canada means 65 new Canadian members of Congress and 2 Canadian senators, I am on board. It's a great idea. I love the Canadians. I would give anything to be a Canadian. 60 Canadian members of the House of Representatives? Are you effing kidding me? Who's invading who? Naturally, Trump never bothered to game out the whole annexing Canada thing. He just sees white people. As I said, stupid and racist, which is the same thing. Stupid and racist, and it's why Trump thinks he can convince enough of us that we're at war with Venezuela. And he can invoke war powers to round up imaginary enemy combatants. Imaginary enemy combatants like the ones in Gitmo who were taken off the battlefield in Afghanistan. Imaginary enemy combatants. If most Americans still believe the Taliban attacked us on 9/11, it's not that heavy a lift convincing enough of us that everyone on board those flights to El Salvador were terrorists, including Garcia. It's very easy to lie to the American people. It's very easy to lie to the American people, especially if you're just as stupid as the American people, which Trump is. Trump is just as stupid as the American people he's lying to. He literally has his finger on the pulse of the American people. And so is Pam Bondi. And they're racist, which is the same thing. They learned in the cradle how to dehumanize people of color. Doesn't even have to, like lying. Her racism doesn't even have to think about it. Pam Bondi, born in Tampa, Florida, where they're not allowed to teach critical race. And that's what the war on DEI is really about. When she was asked on Fox News about Garcia, she lies and said he was MS-13, adding, the best thing to do is to get these people out of our country. These people. She uses the words "these people" to trigger a response in Fox viewers already predisposed to virulent racism. It's why they watch Fox. These people. Calling them people means she's using the term people generously, sarcastically. These people. What she's saying is they're animals who belong in cages. The best thing to do is to get these people out of our country. This is internalized systemic racism that you're not allowed to teach. Not allowed to teach about internalized systemic racism in Florida. It's built into our nation's DNA going back to before we were even free from the British. Native Americans, slaves, women, they are not people. Their lives, their families are disposable. And you see that in the Republican agenda. Women, Native Americans, people of color, black people, not people, disposable. On Friday, Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokesperson, despite the Justice Department's attorney assigned to Garcia's case, despite that attorney telling the judges that there is zero evidence to suggest Garcia is a gang member, let alone a criminal, Caroline Leavitt lied. Once again, lied, telling reporters that Garcia's a member of MS-13. She lied. He must be guilty of something because his last name is Garcia. Look at this beautiful child he's in a prison in El Salvador right now. He has 3 children who are American citizens, married to an American citizen. Caroline Leavitt, Attorney General Pam Bondi, both condemned this innocent man to God knows what inside that El Salvadoran torture chamber, while around both their necks dangled crosses as big as the one Jesus was nailed to. Lying, bearing false witness, destroying a man's life. The father of 3 children, a husband, they lie with joyful abandon, with gigantic garish crosses around their necks to remind everyone of their deep devotion to Christ. Yeah, who would Jesus frame? Paula Zinnes was the U.S. District Judge overseeing Garcia's case until the Supreme Court took it late Monday night. Late Sunday, she ordered the Trump administration to bring Garcia home by Monday at midnight, Monday night, right before Tuesday morning. The Trump administration appealed her order before the Supreme Court. That was after a 3-judge panel for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals issued an emergency ruling Monday upholding Judge Paula Zinnes's ruling. In their rejection of the Trump administration's claim, one judge wrote, quote, "There's no question the government screwed up. Don't think you need a law degree to understand that language." Chief Justice John Roberts, late Monday night, issued a stay on that order. So Garcia remains inside that El Salvadoran torture chamber until the Supreme Court sorts this all out. Now, as in last year's immunity case, I kept hoping this court would do right by us. They continue to disappoint. If Garcia doesn't come home, if the Supreme Court doesn't order Garcia home, well, it is an open and shut case, but so was the one against Donald Trump. In a series of rulings starting on Friday, Judge Zinnes, according to the BBC, accused ICE of arresting Garcia, quote, without any lawful authority. She said his detention is, quote, without legal basis. She said it's a direct contravention of U.S. law. The BBC reporting the judge, she told lawyers for the Justice Department that the situation you have placed Garcia in, quote, shocks the conscience. She said, sending an innocent man down to El Salvador's prison shocks the conscience. The Washington Post reporting that Judge Zenas admonished lawyers for the Justice Department who called ICE's arrest of Garcia, quote, an honest mistake, an administrative error, and an oversight. The judge said ICE arrested Garcia based on discounted hearsay that Garcia was a gang member 6 years ago. The judge saying, quote, the evidence against Abrego Garcia consisted of nothing more than his Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie and a vague, uncorroborated allegation from a confidential informant claiming he belonged to MS-13's Western clique in New York, a place he has never lived, unquote. Somebody said he's MS-13. A lot of the guys at Gitmo were sent there because rival tribes working with American soldiers had vendettas, and they would say, that guy, he's a terrorist. You've no proof, no trials. You're an enemy combatant. Now you're in Gitmo. It's not like any of this stuff hasn't been done before by Republicans. In appealing the judge's ruling before the Supreme Court, our Justice Department is going to argue that Donald Trump made a deal with the president of El Salvador to hold migrants from Venezuela, as well as migrants from El Salvador, inside that El Salvadoran prison for $6 million a year. We're paying El Salvador $6 million a year, and each year, according to the deal, we'll renegotiate. We'll see how it's going. We'll decide whether to continue with the arrangement. In other words, it's temporary. Lawyers for the government have already said that once these migrants are in the custody of El Salvadoran officials, there is no legal remedy for bringing Garcia back to the United States, since he is a citizen of El Salvador, not the United States. Lawyers for Pam Bondi's Justice Department insisting that to demand Garcia's return would breach the sovereignty of another nation. All of a sudden, the United States is worried about breaching the sovereignty of another nation. The CIA training El Salvador's death squads to kill union organizers, that's okay. But all of a sudden, we're concerned about the sovereignty of El Salvador. Look, forget the law. Pay attention to the power dynamic. El Salvador does whatever the United States tells it to do regarding Garcia. We extradite Central Americans all the time and bring them to the United States all the time to be put on trial for drug dealing. Mexico just extradited Rafael Caro Quintero, now in the United States. In February of this year, Mexico extradited him. He's a Mexican citizen, a drug dealer, convicted in Mexico of killing and torturing a United States DEA agent back in 1985. And he served 28 years in a Mexican prison for that crime. But because Trump was threatening tariffs, claiming Mexico is failing to stem the flow of fentanyl into our country, Mexico, to appease Donald Trump, agreed to Quintero's extradition here to the United States so he could stand trial for killing that DEA agent. Now, one would think Mexico would refuse to extradite, claiming this would be double jeopardy. You can't try a man twice for the same crime. But when it comes to the law, you must consider the power dynamic. It was Trump. Tariffs. Give me Quintero. And President Sheinbaum of Mexico buckled. There is no law. Not when you're dealing with Trump. There's no law. It's all about power dynamics. He had no problem demanding Quintero, but when it comes to Garcia, a man who's totally innocent, a man who's been granted temporary legal status, a man married to a U.S. citizen, the father of 3 U.S. citizens, our hands are tied. Yes, technically he's an El Salvadoran citizen, not an American citizen. The same way, technically, Quintero is a Mexican citizen, not an American citizen. But Trump somehow found the legal reasoning to extradite Quintero and not Garcia. The Washington Post reporting that Judge Paula Zenas, who ordered Garcia to be returned by late Monday night, she told lawyers for the Justice Department, after they made their argument, this isn't about your inability to return Garcia to America. It's about your lack of desire to return him. Well, it's before the Supreme Court now. I figured by the time you heard this, the Supreme Court would have refused to take the case. They would have upheld the lower court's demand that Garcia be returned immediately. Instead, our Chief Justice issued a stay, meaning Garcia stays in that torture chamber. We are in uncharted territory here. We have a new Justice Department. It's the worst. It's run by Trump loyalists who care more about how Trump judges them than how the courts, the bar associations, or history judges them. It's a new day. Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, who was Trump's lawyer in the Manhattan criminal trial, Emil Bove, the Associate Deputy Attorney General, also one of Trump's lawyers in the Manhattan criminal trial, the current Solicitor General of the United States, D. John Sauer. He was the one who represented Trump before the Supreme Court last year, arguing that a president can order SEAL Team 6 to murder his political opponent and is immune from prosecution. Kash Patel, the head of the FBI. Dan Bongino, the deputy head of the FBI. These are all Trump loyalists who swore an oath to protect Trump, not the Constitution. They don't care about their next jobs. They don't care about their reputation the way the people preceding them do and did. They understand political capture of government also includes the capture of non-government institutions. Now, in the past, their behavior would have been punished by societal norms, law firms, corporations, ashamed of being associated with them. But In the authoritarian playbook, you co-opt the institutional guardrails. You threaten, as Trump is doing right now quite successfully, all the fancy law firms, forcing them to perform $100 million in free legal work for Trump's favorite causes. And what that does, by getting the corporate law firms, the corporations to buckle, you capture societal norms. And instead of punishing the bad lawyering that we're seeing in the Justice Department, you reward it. That is how authoritarians rule. It's not just capturing government. It's capturing all the institutions that feed off government, all the institutions that keep government in line by challenging government in the courts, by saying, you're a bad person, we're not going to hire you at our bank. Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, D. John Sauer, Kash Patel, and Emil Bove. I don't think Bongino's a lawyer. But like the rest of them, they're third-rate intellects with the moral compass of a slug. As Trump and Elon Musk tighten their authoritarian grip, every top law firm, every bank, investment group, and hedge fund will be falling over themselves to hire these hateful, mendacious lowlifes. Because in an authoritarian regime, the crap rises to the top. It's why fascism always fails. Always. Unfortunately, along the way, lives are lost and ruined, but fascism eventually fails because the people in charge are crap. This Justice Department, under Pam Bondi, has zero tolerance for decency or the truth. That is why she just suspended the lawyer assigned to keeping Garcia in El Salvador. He's been suspended. He couldn't do it. His name is Prosecutor Erez Ruveni. He is the Justice Department lawyer who argued on behalf of the Trump administration before Judge Zinni. It was his responsibility to keep Garcia in prison permanently in El Salvador. Couldn't do it. Had a conscience. He cracked. So he's been suspended. Look him up. Erez Ruveni. His official title was Assistant Director in the Justice Department's Office of Immigration Litigation. He was suspended. Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, said Ruveni failed to make the right arguments for why Garcia should remain in El Salvador's custody. There is no right argument. ABC News reporting that Pam Bondi issued a statement suspending Ruveni where she said, quote, "At my direction, every Department of Justice attorney is required to zealously advocate on behalf of the United States. Any attorney who fails to abide by this direction will face consequences," unquote. It's outrageous. The BBC reporting Pam Bondi appeared on Fox News to trash this attorney. She says, quote, "He shouldn't have taken the case. He shouldn't have argued it if that's what he was going to do." She went on to say, "You have to vigorously argue on behalf of your client, the Department of Justice. In other words, you have to lie. You have to lie. The same way she lies and says Garcia is a member of MS-13. Pete Hegseth didn't violate the Espionage Act. She tells countless lies. The New Republic reporting on the exchanges Friday between this guy Ravini, the Justice Department lawyer, his job, keep Garcia permanently in El Salvador's prison. The New Republic reported on the exchanges between this guy Ravini and Judge Zenas, and it was pretty remarkable. Ravini was supposed to argue on behalf of Trump. He was supposed to argue why Garcia should remain in El Salvador. Couldn't do it because he took an oath to defend the Constitution, not Donald Trump. He admitted before the judge, I asked the Department of Homeland Security for evidence that Garcia was a member of MS-13. I asked for evidence that Garcia is in fact a criminal. He said, for some reason, that evidence is being withheld from me, unquote. It's being withheld from you because there isn't any evidence. The New Republic reporting that Ravini then told the judge, quote, I am also frustrated that I have no answer for you on a lot of these questions. The government made a choice here to produce no evidence, unquote. This is why he's been suspended. When the judge asked Ravini if the Justice Department had been made aware of a 2019 ruling by an immigration judge granting Garcia protective legal status, Ravini then said, this is according to the New Republic, quote, I do not have that order. It is not in the record. It wasn't in the record. They were arguing, the Justice Department was arguing to keep Garcia in El Salvador unaware that an immigration judge had granted him protected legal status. In a functioning democracy, you punish the Justice Department for this rancid lawyering at the top. In a fascist state, you reward it. You don't reward Ravini. Ravini is the good guy here, and he's been suspended for telling the truth. But in a democracy, you punish the rancid lawyering that comes from the top. You punish Pam Bondi. You punish Emile Bove, Todd Blanche. But this is a new day. According to the New Republic, Ravini was asked the big question. Judge Zenas said, well, since we've established that Garcia was deported by accident, since ICE admits they made a mistake, what is the Justice Department's legal rationale for not returning Garcia to the United States? I mean, that is the question. And Donald Trump always says to his lawyers, I'm looking for that Perry Mason moment. He wants something dramatic where, one side crumbles. And Trump got a Perry Mason moment on Friday, but unfortunately it was his side that crumbled. It was Ravini, this lawyer representing Trump. He crumbled. Couldn't do it. Representing the Justice Department, Ravini answered the judge with the following. He was asked, okay, we know Garcia did nothing wrong. He's in a prison he doesn't belong. What is your argument for keeping him there? You've been paid. You work for Pam Bondi. You work for the Justice Department. You've been tasked with making the argument for keeping Garcia permanently in El Salvador. Give me the argument. He said, quote, When this case landed on my desk, I asked my clients, that would be Pam Bondi, that would be the Justice Department, I asked my clients that very question. I have not received to date an answer that I find satisfactory, unquote. Heroic. And so Pam Bondi placed him on leave and humiliated him on Fox News. She said, "You didn't do your job. You didn't defend the indefensible." For telling the judge, according to The Guardian, quote, "There appears to be an absence of evidence to justify Garcia's removal and detention." That's what he said. He said, "There is, Your Honor, an absence of law to justify keeping Garcia in El Salvador." For saying that, Pam Bondi got rid of him. This lawyer is the hero. He's the lawyer Hollywood makes movies about. You know, he starts the day thinking he's going to argue on behalf of Trump and Bondi, and he has that moment where he can't do it. Normally, Hollywood makes a movie about him. Normally. But things are no longer normal. There's a new normal. Now, lawyers for the Justice Department are supposed to lie, and if they won't lie, they're replaced with lawyers who will. This is the normalization of don't believe your own eyes, don't believe reality, believe what we tell you is reality. It is also the normalization of dehumanization. That's precisely how fascism works. Trump, the people around him are stupid, but they know how fascism works. Because it's really not that hard to be a fascist. It's a very simple playbook. Fear. Just employ fear. Keep people stupid. Lie. And let's be honest here. The normalization of dehumanization started long before Trump's grandparents even came to this country. Trump's just perfecting it. And dark forces are helping him. Maybe even the Supreme Court. We'll find out. Feels like it. Our Constitution literally says black people are 3/5 of a human being. What is more dehumanizing than a Constitution that says black people are 3/5 of a human being? That was written only to guarantee the South have equal congressional representation as the North. The number of House members each state gets is based on their population. Wyoming only gets one House member. California sends, I think, 52 House members to Washington. Canada will send about 60, maybe. So the Constitution says black people are 3/5 of a human being, so that 3/5 of a state's slave population would be considered when allocating members of the House of Representatives, drawing congressional districts. But when it came to voting, when it came to freedom and human rights, black people were 0/5 of a human being. So dehumanization, it's baked into every strand. Both helixes, every nucleotide of our DNA. How's it pronounced? Nucleotide. Every amino acid, every phosphate of our nation's DNA. It should come as no surprise the El Salvadoran prisons we're shipping these men to are among the world's worst, and yet that doesn't seem to be any cause for alarm. If anything, it's cause for celebration, at least for Republicans. Judge Zina, in her order to bring Garcia back, spoke of prisoners. She spoke of it. Prisoners stripped and shackled, heads shaved. According to the Washington Post, in her order to bring Garcia back, Judge Zenas described the El Salvadoran prisons as, quote, some of the most inhumane and squalid conditions known in any carceral system, unquote. One would think the Eighth Amendment forbids cruel and unusual punishment. But this is America, where we have 2.5 million Americans locked up in prisons and jails that are also among the worst in the world. Punishment in America is cruel but not unusual. Anybody shocked by El Salvadoran prisons should visit Rikers Island here in New York City, or the jail inside that Fulton County Sheriff's Office down in Georgia, where Trump is still standing trial for election interference. How many suicides in Fonnie Willis's Fulton County Sheriff's Office jail? Our prisons are overcrowded torture chambers where solitary confinement, sexual assault, suicide is the norm. We have people in Rikers, in that Fulton County Sheriff's Office, being jailed with no charges, not even charged with a crime. Most of the U.S. citizens, we have 2.5 million people behind bars. Most U.S. citizens never had a trial. They're guaranteed one in the Bill of Rights. They plea out. Most of the people behind bars in the United States are nonviolent. And again, quite a few of them haven't even been charged with a crime. They're being held indefinitely, too poor, too neglected for a habeas corpus petition. Forbes reporting yesterday that prisoners in El Salvador don't get beds. They sleep on metal bunks with no pillows, mattresses, or sheets. Dozens of inmates to a single cell with only a half hour a day outside. The lights permanently on. CNN reporting they're given nothing to read, with one meal a day slid through their bars. Forbes reporting that the U.S. State Department under Joe Biden described these prisons as, quote, harsh and life-threatening, where torture is the norm. Torture that includes beatings and electric shocks. And Trump wants to send American citizens convicted of crimes down there. During a press conference on board Air Force One Sunday night, a reporter asked Trump if he was going to take El Salvador's president up on that offer to house U.S. citizens in his prisons. Trump said, well, I love that. If we could take some of our wise guys that push people into subways and hit people over the back of the head and purposely run people over in cars, if he would take them, I would be honored to give them over to him, unquote. Not the first time he said that. Last week, Trump said he wanted to send down to El Salvador the 3 people charged with domestic terrorism after they were arrested for vandalizing Teslas. The first time El Salvador's president made the offer to take U.S. citizens was during Marco Rubio's visit to El Salvador in early February. That's when Trump made the deal to house our migrants down there for $6 million a year. Trump was asked about the offer in early February about sending citizens to El Salvador. He said, I like that idea, but, he added, quote, I don't know what the law says on that. Yeah, like it would matter. According to the New Republic, the law says you cannot deport American citizens. You can't send them to foreign prisons. Then again, it also says you can't deport immigrants with protected legal status. And our Chief Justice, John Roberts, late Monday night, refused to uphold a lower court's ruling on this. Our Chief Justice needed more information before ordering Garcia home. There are a lot of laws. Some laws apply to us. Some laws don't apply. Same laws don't apply to others. Trump says he would only do what the law says. Yeah, our president, the convicted felon, the man who tried to overthrow the government of the United States on January 6th, is going to obey the law. The man who would be in prison right now if instead of the United States, this were France, Brazil, Israel, South Korea, or the dozens of other democracies that have no problem removing and or arresting corrupt tyrants. This is who we are. This is who we are. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Don't get arrested. Don't get arrested. Speak up. Exercise your First Amendment rights. Protest. Fight for your country peacefully. Doesn't have to be this way. Does not have to be this way. Thank you for listening to me. If you enjoyed any of this, and I don't know why you would, please share it with like-minded people. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. Please leave a comment if I said anything that's factually incorrect. Please feel free to let me know. I have no problem if you can back it up with hyperlinks. I have no problem being told I was got something wrong. I do get things wrong. So, yeah, leave a comment, hit the like button, share this, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to lighten up. I'm going to try to do some lighter shows that are not as heavy as this. This was, okay. Thank you.